Hello and welcome to episode 6 of the non-operative and the second part of Dani's pathway to the Olympics. This episode provides an insight into the complex decision-making process involved in weighing up whether to have surgery. It's also quite a chaotic insight into the conflicting advice provided by the NHS, which Dani is relying on for rehab support whilst out of camp from her Jamaica Rugby 7 squad. She left her team following the ACL rupture and is now on her own trying to figure out how to get back in time to help guide them to their first ever Olympic appearance. So there's a lot on the line here for you, right?
Yes.
I wanted to talk to you about the decision-making process involved. You've ruptured your ACL, it's less than 12 months until the Olympics, and you want to be involved in the qualification process. So what's going through your mind?
True to his word, it was the following month to the day that he could give me the op. So that was booked in immediately. And then I went to see the NHS physio because he got me booked in immediately with him. And basically, the physio did the Lachman test and said, this is so strange. Like, you'd think now that I know there's an ACL tear, I'd be able to feel it. But my knee still felt strong. I could squat past 90 degrees. I was walking on it. I had a very slight bend in it still where I couldn't fully straighten it. And that was just a little bit of swelling that was still in there. But that soon went.
How long was this post? Were you talking about this?
This was a week.
About a week after, yeah.
Yeah, it was the following week. I'd back in the UK, saw the doctor pretty much. I was 2 days back in the UK, then saw the doctor. He booked me in with the physio the same day I saw him, and that was my first session. And then I saw that physio weekly for the first 3 weeks. And basically, he just pushed me. We did jump onto a box, single leg, jump off the box onto the damaged leg. We did some change of direction. We did squatting and went up to 70 kg, deadlifting 90 kg.
Wow.
So I was doing, and you know, they were my 1 rep maxes before the ACL injury, but now I can actually do a good amount of reps on them because mentally I didn't want anything to stop me from doing it. And I thought this ACL is not stopping me from doing it. And I wanted to impress my physio and I wanted to hear some good news or a miracle.
Quite remarkable that your physio was putting you through these type of, you know, often the case ACL, get your knee in a brace and protect you till in case your leg falls off until surgery.
Yeah. So he was a young physio and he spoke to his manager as such, and his manager had been researching a lot of non-op routes for ACL healing. So they were aware of it, but it wasn't something that they really believed. So he did have a conversation with me about other routes that he was aware of happening in Australia, the Netherlands, but he said it's not the protocol we follow here at the NHS. And we have guidelines and rules we have to follow, which he explained to me. But he found the conversations really interesting because I'd obviously Googled so much and told him about friends that had come back sooner. And when he was testing my knee, he was kind of like, you know, I'm seeing patients with ACL tears and he said, we can't even do this exciting change of direction stuff or anything at this point because they can barely straighten their knee, let alone bend it. So he was like really intrigued at the stage and level I was at, considering I'd a week ago done this injury. So his attitude was, we can push you as much as we want because if it fully tears or if something else happens, you're going in for a knee operation in 4 weeks. So just repair everything. So my doctor was also supportive of that, saying, if you want to go and play a game and see how far you can push it, or, you know, let the physio push you into the end stage as such of the like ACL sign-off elements. He said, go for it because whatever happens, I'll repair it while I'm in there.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the attitude that we had. So we did change of direction. We pushed it. By the second week, the physio was kind of frustrated, saying, I don't know what else I can do with you because you're doing everything I would be pushing you to do other than playing an actual competitive game.
Yeah.
And obviously in his perspective, a competitive game, you switch off, you're not going to think about protecting your knee. You're going to be in the moment of the game. The adrenaline's there. So if you're going to if your knee's not strong enough, you're not going to be able to protect it as such because you're going to be caught off guard.
Yeah.
So we started talking about me playing a game, which I was apprehensive about because half in my mind I thought, I don't want to go.
I'm guessing you're a bit blown away by this approach, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's not the normal protocol, and I didn't expect them to be so open about it. And obviously coming home and speaking to friends and family, they were kind of like, that doesn't sound right. Well, if you're having the operation, that seems silly. You just need to rest and, all that kind of conversation. But the physio that I had, those few sessions, it started giving me confidence because I kept thinking, I need to listen to my own body. At the end of the day, there's all this research, all this science, but I'm also looking at some really unique situations like the girl I mentioned earlier who went back in 3 months after a reconstruction. Everything's happening different people. So maybe I just need to trust myself and listen to what my body's doing. And right now I've got no pain. I had pretty much full range of movement, so I could straighten it, but I couldn't bend it all the way. There's like a tiny bit left. But I thought to myself, my other leg's really stiff anyway, so my squat depth isn't great anyway. I can jump, I can land single leg. It's still stronger when I do single leg exercises over the other leg, the reconstructed leg. So I just thought I'm going to keep pushing it and I'm going to keep strengthening and then make a decision. So that I had another conversation with my doctor and he said, look, your option are you have a full reconstruction and I fix the meniscus while I'm in there. Or he said, I can leave your ACL alone and you can just have your meniscus repaired. He said, you don't have to have the operation. He said, but if you want to go back to international sport, his opinion was I needed the op. So
and what was the foundation for that last part of it, that you wouldn't be able to cut fully? Like you wouldn't be able to turn at the same...
He said... Yeah, he was impressed with everything I could do, but he was saying what you're doing is very linear. You're doing squats, which your knee faces forward. I was running as well. Sorry, I was going out running. I did a couple of 3Ks because I didn't want to push it too much, but I definitely could have done a 5K or whatever. I was hill sprinting. So he was kind of like, please don't do that. Don't hill sprint or whatever. Mm-hmm. But then afterwards he was kind of like, I know I'm naughty. So he knew I would do it. And when I told him, he just said, well, if I'm honest, your ACL is there to protect your knee when you twist and turn and change direction. And he said, so I'm not surprised you can do the things you do. You're an athlete. He said the real test will be is if you change direction and can it stand up? Will your knee hold it in place then?
Yeah.
Which again is why him and the physio were saying you should try again because we'll at least we'll know if it doesn't go, then maybe you don't need the ARP. But if it does go, you definitely need the ARP. So I was thinking, yeah, that's true. But yeah, I was holding off. I don't know what made me hold off. I kept researching and Googling. And then I found you basically on Instagram.
Oh dear.
No, all good. I read through your page and all the videos, and I wish I'd done something myself now because obviously I'm like 10 weeks in now, 10 weeks post injury. But looking at all your stuff,
I think most people do as well wish they'd done it, but you don't really feel like it at the time. I didn't want to record those videos. I was like, yeah, I know how hard it is going through it. And it, like you say, you speak to your friends, you speak to your relatives, and it doesn't really help because they're not going through what you're going through. So I was like, I'm going to drag myself, put a camera up in front of myself and talk about this. When it's the last thing you want to do. Like you want to talk to people that, your close circle, your safe space of people, but they're not really helping you. Yeah. So, yeah. No. But here you are anyway. You're lucky you've got a good memory, yeah, so you're telling the story really well in terms of what you went through.
It's because I'm still questioning everything I'm still going through because obviously I'm not there yet. But yeah, just those videos and everything, I started to feel hopeful. Like I kept thinking, well, this guy can do it. And you know, he plays sport and he's further along than me. So every video I went through, there were so many key things that you said that I could really relate to, like the way I felt emotionally, the conversations I was having with others and how that made me feel. You kept touching on all these things. And I kept thinking, yeah, that's the same as me, Tim, you know, that's the same. And it was so relatable. And I think because you're further along than me, ahead of where I was, it just kept giving me hope. But what I wanted from you is I wanted you to tell me that you were back at sport and everything was fine, and you'd 6 months been playing and it's not gone again, and it's perfect,
healed, you got me
or whatever.
With a gold medal around my neck, don't you?
Yes. In order for me just to have that final bit and go, do you know what, I'm going the non-op route.
Yep.
But it definitely helps. It definitely made me feel more human, and it makes you feel, like I said, the conversations you have with people who are supportive of you but not in the exact same position, it's really difficult for them to understand what you're feeling and how you're thinking, and like answer all the questions that you've got. So you did a lot of that just with your page alone, and then obviously I reached out and asked you thousands of questions, which you were more than helpful in responding again and just making me feel like I was sane, and gave me comfort in the position I was in at that time, whichever week I was on at that point.
Yeah, well, I think that's the same both ways, though. Finding that connection with people that are experiencing the same feelings as you at that time is really important. And I think that's something that stressed to anyone that when they're going through it is, don't be surprised if you don't get that same sense of comfort from people who can't really, people empathize more with you if you tell me you've broken your wrist than if you've ruptured your ACL, right? Because it's like, oh, I don't really understand that. It's a long time period, but you can do other things. I don't really understand your situation. But speaking to other people that are similarly passionate about their sport and have had that ripped away from them in the same way, I think is helpful, regardless of what stage you're in throughout it. Hopefully it was favourable for you to, when you're making that decision, that you kind of saw that, but that what I'd been through and kind of making those few steps ahead of you. But I'm sorry, I'm not going to the Olympics.
Yeah. How dare you?
Bit of letdown. Playing it over 35s in Melbourne instead.
No, not at all. It was still really helpful and useful, honestly, because sport at the end of the day, you're still doing what I'm doing, twisting, turning, running, having to get your strength up. So no, everything was relatable and really, really helpful, really was. And then it was obviously you who then started sharing more research that really opened my eyes. So you gave me links to studies of people, studies that were proving the bracing protocol works. So I found that really interesting. I probably overread the same document several times and did a lot of research around all of that data.
And then we're like, it's too late for me to brace anyway. So
yeah, exactly.
Thanks, Tim.
So then I thought the bracing protocol is not for me, but what it did do again is just give confidence that actually, if this is the case, there's possibly some truth with, the ACL healing or reattaching to a PCL or regaining stability in some way. So there were just more answers to things that actually in the UK, it's black and white. That's not true. It does not heal. You cannot come back without surgery. Do you know what I mean? It was just opening my eyes to this other world and other beliefs.
Yeah, and I think it's raising questions around the stuff that you've been told as facts without the evidence, and now hopefully the only stuff I've provided you with is evidence that what is being said out there kind of quite strongly and publicly by certain voices as a matter of fact isn't. There's a lot more grey around that, and that's what needs kind of investigating. I guess that's what makes us curious. I mean, for me, it's a lot more about I'm really curious about the subject and that we're clearly as patients not being educated and given the options that we should be. For you, I guess it's more about an option that can allow you to fulfill your dream, and whether that's by healing or whether it's by making your ACL asymptomatic by doing the rehab to strengthen your knee. I mean, it doesn't sound like you need to do much more strengthening with your knee anyway, but obviously doing the right rehab that's going to protect your knee and the different ways of which we can build our bodies to protect us from these injuries that are so commonly happening, as happened to you twice, happened to me twice, and why there's not kind of more education around that as well, I think, are probably the things that our eyes together kind of got opened to, and that certainly made me, and it sounds like it made you kind of a bit more determined to go, right, I'm going to prove something wrong by, my body's telling me this, and I want to back that and do something which will be pretty remarkable. Like if you do achieve your dream and play at the Olympics, down this pathway will be a fantastic story that obviously I'm looking forward to following. But sorry, I've jumped in a bit there. So really, you were still at this stage curious, but you had time, right? So you had still a month to make a decision, and I guess what you're thinking is prepare your body as best for surgery, or make the other decision. And what kind of led you towards the decision that you did eventually make?
So my mindset was I started upping my strength training. So I obviously do a lot of plyometrics, but instead I just moved to strength training of my legs. So a lot of single leg lunges, weighted, squats, deadlifts, and was just doing that consistently because I thought whatever happens, that's going to help the operation, my recovery afterwards. Or if I choose not to, then at least I've already started everything. So I started on with that. And then, like you say, I had 4 weeks until my operation date. So that kind of for me was a deadline. I kind of said to myself, I will let the doctor know at least a week before so they can reuse the date for somebody else. But I needed to make a decision by that date. So I put myself under immense pressure doing research. So obviously following everything you were doing, looking at links you'd advised, following loads of the knees over toes guy. I was looking at all sorts of stuff. I'm probably an expert myself now. I've done that much research, listening to podcasts of other people who have been in a similar situation and healed. And then obviously you gave me Dr. Kieran Richardson's information, and I started obsessively going through his website, podcasts he'd been on, documents that he'd released around all of this. And all of a sudden my perspective was changing so much more. It was kind of like, oh my God, there is definitely another way now, because look at all this evidence, this proof, there's a professional. And thanks to you reaching out to him, he sent me a message directly and we started talking about my situation. Booked an appointment with him because I just had so many questions. And I think this is really important. Like, I think whether we want to admit it or not, you go and see a doctor, whatever they tell you, you take as gospel and you tend not to question it. And so that's why it's so powerful to be a doctor, but also so important that they give you the right information. And my UK doctor, I have so much respect for him, and he's a very knowledgeable guy. And he definitely has given me the advice based on his experience. What he doesn't have is this other method of ACL healing or protocol. So I don't in any way want to undermine what he said or disrespect what he's said to me, because there's nothing wrong with what he said in that sense. But obviously Kieran's research is completely different. He's got a different perspective and seen things that my doctor hasn't. And seen people through the recovery of an ACL tear without surgery on several occasions. So
I think he says thousands of occasions that he's worked with people returning to sport without ACL reconstruction. So
obviously for me, it was like an amazing moment. I was so excited, but at the same time apprehensive for this call with him, because I thought, I don't want him to convince me 100% the other way. I want to feel subjective still, because I don't want to make the wrong decision. I don't want to go, well, this guy in Australia said to me, blah, 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 on a Zoom call, versus my NHS doctor who has helped me before and has got a lot of experience in this area. And obviously my family were kind of like, oh, don't get drawn up that this is going to be the way you're going to go just because it suits your Olympic journey. Because obviously his protocol is kind of like, there are people that have gone back within 3 months post-injury. Some people have gone back in 6, but all of this is sooner than what I would come back if I had the operation. So it definitely was in my favour to go with what he was saying. So I just didn't want to be making the decision because of that emotion. I wanted it to be the right decision. So it was still really difficult.
Which is a lot of stress, by the way, right? Like for you to be in that situation. Yeah. And I was feeling, one of the main reasons why I said speak to Dr. Kieran Richardson was I didn't want to be, a subjective influence to you. I wanted to tell you my experience. I wanted to show you what I'd researched. And the evidence that I'd seen that drew me to my decision, and then explain to you my journey, but I didn't really, I'm not a medical professional. I didn't want to give you advice. So that's why I thought it was important to speak to him we've talked off air about one of the things that we kind of scrutinize is like we're scrutinizing whether surgery is the best option, but also I think it's important that we scrutinize the other way. Is this evidence? Does it stand up? Is there people, and looking around for examples of people who have tried to go down this pathway and failed, and trying to understand, see it from both sides. It hurts your head after a while.
Yeah.
But
well, I was so stressed, wasn't sleeping. I was still crying, so it was still kind of like there were so many times I had a moment where it was like, you're being ridiculous, do what you know.
Yeah.
The comfort was to just go and have the operation, because
I was going to say,
before.
would it have been the easier thing for you emotionally to just go, I'll have surgery and I'll try and get back I'll deal with that problem later about in terms of getting back sooner than most do.
Yeah, because in my mind, I want it so bad, I would come back quicker whether, you told me I couldn't or not. I was going to do that. But then obviously the niggle in my mind was, what if my reconstruction doesn't go as well? Because then I started researching ACL recons that have failed, no.
This is a rabbit hole you don't want to go down once you've got ruptured ACL.
Yeah. So I started looking at operations that hadn't worked. I started looking at people who, like, the stats around how many ACLs re-tear following the operation. And so I started to scare myself now, because obviously in my head, all I wanted to do is get back quicker than ever. But then the more research I was looking at for getting back quicker after the recon, there's a higher chance of me re-tearing it and, making everything 10 times worse and being out regardless.
Yeah.
So there was all those risks, and I started to research. So lots of stress. I was driving everyone insane because it was all I was talking about. I was trying to make other people make the decision for me, probably you to a degree as well. Because it would have been easier if someone just went, I understand, this is what you do, just get it done. So it was a whirlwind of hell for those 3 weeks before I made the decision. I think what ultimately swayed it was the conversation with Kieran Richardson. I had an hour's call with him where I'd sent him an abundance of questions. I think there was like 16, 17 questions of, that I'd really overthought that I needed to know in order to make my decision. And the few key things that stood out was, I think I mentioned this to you, he looked at my MRI and told me that my ACL was still touching, even though it was torn, which then obviously, not that he wants to promise me anything, but there's a higher chance of it healing, reattaching, because it was still in, the vicinity of each other where the tear was. He then spoke to me about the possibility of your ACL reattaching to your PCL. And we talked objectively about the operation. And I think I love the fact that he's not anti operation. So he did say, if we go through this and your knee was unstable and it kept popping out and it didn't matter how much strengthening you were doing or whatever, or you started damaging other ligaments, he said, I think for your situation in that circumstance, it would mean you need to have an operation just to reinforce all those ligaments, because they're not going to improve based on the rehab we've done, based on the training we've done or whatever. So he was like, I'm definitely aware that some people need the operation and that's their route. But he just said, based on the strength in my knee, the fact it wasn't buckling, all I could do at that point, I mean, I was 4 weeks nearly post-injury, and I was doing pretty much everything I had been doing before. He was like, to a degree,
had you started training at this stage?
No, so I did some netball drills on my own and with a family member. So some change of direction, some fast-paced stuff.
Yep.
But I haven't gone back and played a game still in either rugby or netball. But I definitely was doing the same training I'd be doing when I was in season.
Right.
Which he was kind of like...
You're out of season at this point.
Out of season, yeah. The rugby sevens is tournaments only anyway, so there isn't really a season as such.
Yep.
But it's more aimed at summer. And then netball restarts September, which is upon us. But it had ended in June time. So I only had there are lower pace games, lower standard games that I could be playing, but they're not a necessity for me. So I took advantage of that. But Kieran was kind of like, right, I don't want you to push it this much. He said, because he was just describing the healing that can be happening in the first 12 weeks post-injury. And also, obviously, from his experience, intense rehab is better than me trying to replicate what I'm doing in my sport immediately, just to promote the healing, promote the strengthening in order to give me the best possible outcome after those 12 weeks. So we just had a great conversation, and I have to admit it pretty much convinced me I have everything to gain by focusing on my rehab properly and seeing if it will heal, or seeing if I can keep the